Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into a story that's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. Imagine this: you spend weeks preparing for a special occasion, carefully planning every detail, inviting your family, and making sure everything is perfect. And then, on the day of the event, you're left alone in the silence with the cold dishes and candles that should have been shared with the people you love. But that silence, it's not just a mist gathering, it's a symbol of something much deeper, a hidden betrayal that has been carefully orchestrated. And for the first time in your life, you realize you're no longer part of the family you once thought you were. It's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? But what if this has been happening for years, slowly and quietly, and you never saw it coming? That feeling of being erased, forgotten, and invisible. It's the kind of thing that makes you question your place in the world. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and time zone in the comments. I'm curious to see how far this story has traveled. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for a little background noise, and let's begin this journey together tonight. When I turned 65, I decided it was time to celebrate. I spent 3 weeks meticulously planning my birthday party, choosing the perfect menu, decorating the dining room with fresh flowers, and making sure everyone was invited. I even bought a new dress, navy blue, with tiny pearl buttons, the kind Elliot always said made me look elegant. I had the table set for 8: Elliot, my daughter-in-law Jenna, my 2 grandchildren, Charlie and Mia, my sister Ruth, her husband Carl, and of course myself at the head of the table. I wanted to see the faces of my loved ones gathered around me as we celebrated together. I checked the clock. By 6:30, no one had arrived. I thought perhaps I had the time wrong, so I checked my phone. There it was, birthday dinner at 6:00 p.m. I had even sent out reminders to everyone 2 days ago. Still no one had shown up. By 7:00, I called Elliot. Voicemail. I tried Jenna's phone voicemail again. Ruth didn't answer either, and that was unusual. She always answered on the second ring. I stood in the dining room looking at the untouched plates, the candles I had lit an hour ago, now burning down to stumps. The roast in the oven had long since cooled, and the chocolate cake I had baked that morning sat perfectly uncut on the kitchen counter. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe something came up last minute. These things happen, I told myself, even though I could feel my chest tightening and my hands shaking. At 8:00, it was clear they weren't coming. I sank heavily into my chair, staring at the empty seats around me. This wasn't just about lateness. This was something more. The silence in the house felt different. Not peaceful, but hollow, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I should have left it alone, but I made the mistake of checking Facebook. At the top of my feed was a photo that made my blood run cold. Jenna radiant in a white sundress, her arm around Elliot, who was grinning ear to ear, looking happier than I had seen him in months. Behind them, the vast blue of the Mediterranean stretched endlessly. The caption read, "Living our best life on the Mediterranean. So grateful for this amazing family getaway." I scrolled down to see more photos. Charlie and Mia building sandcastles on a pristine beach. Ruth and Carl toasting cocktails at what looked like an elegant ship's bar. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. The photos were posted just an hour ago while I had been waiting at home alone. Thousands of miles away, my family was having fun, laughing and celebrating without me. I felt a crack in my chest. Not a break, but a crack like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature suddenly drops. This wasn't an accident. They had planned this. Jenna had organized a family vacation that deliberately excluded me, and she had scheduled it for my birthday.
Somehow, she had convinced everyone to go along with it, even Ruth, who had helped me pick out decorations for this party just last week.
I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. Jenna's smile seemed almost triumphant, as if she had won something. She was standing exactly where I should have been, at the center of my family, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me the most. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elliot. "Sorry, Mom. Forgot to mention we'd be out of town this week. Jenna booked a surprise trip. Happy birthday, though." He casually added, "Forgot to mention?" As though booking a Mediterranean cruise during my birthday was something you could just forget to tell your mother about. I set my phone down carefully, afraid I might throw it against the wall if I held it any longer.
The roast was cold now. I walked to the kitchen and turned off the oven, my movements slow and mechanical, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I felt like a stranger to myself, this sad woman in her navy blue dress cleaning up the dinner no one came to eat. I wrapped the cake in plastic and put it in the fridge. I blew out the remaining candles, watching them flicker out one by one. I began putting the good china away, each plate clinking against the others too loudly in the silent house. Jenna had won something tonight, though. I wasn't sure what game we'd been playing. All I knew was that for the first time in my 65 years, I felt truly invisible. Not just overlooked, but erased. As I turned off the lights in the dining room, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked smaller, somehow diminished. The woman staring back at me had spent decades being the family peacekeeper. The one who smoothed over arguments, remembered everyone's birthdays, and always put family first. But tonight, they had all chosen to spend my birthday pretending I didn't exist. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. Tomorrow I'd have to face the aftermath, the fake apologies, the excuses about miscommunication, Jenna's sweet voice explaining how the trip had been booked months ago and there was nothing they could do. But tonight I needed to sit with this pain to feel it fully. Because something told me that this wasn't just about a missed birthday. It was about something much bigger, something more deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every family gathering from the last 5 years. The birthdays that weren't just forgotten, but sabotaged. As the hours passed, other memories resurfaced, each more unsettling than the last. Tommy's 4th birthday party. I had been so excited to see him blow out his candles. But when I arrived at the venue, Jenna met me at the door with that apologetic smile. "Oh, Emily, didn't Elliot tell you? We had to move the party to tomorrow. A little emergency came up," she said. But I could hear children laughing inside, and I could see balloons through the window. When I called Elliot later, he seemed genuinely confused. "Tomorrow? No, Mom. The party's definitely today." Jenna must have mixed up the dates. I thought about how things had slowly changed over time. How their lives had continued without me in the picture. Each event a reminder of how invisible I had become. It wasn't a coincidence. It was deliberate. And for the first time, I understood it clearly. I wasn't just forgotten. I had been erased. The night felt endless, and sleep refused to come. Instead of resting, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't stop replaying every family gathering over the past few years. The dinners, the birthday parties, the holidays. There had been too many small, seemingly innocent incidents that now seemed so much more than just miscommunications or misunderstandings. Tommy's 4th birthday party stood out as one of the first signs. I'd been so excited, especially when I saw how eager Tommy was to blow out the candles on his cake. But when I arrived at the venue, Meadow met me at the door with that apologetic smile of hers, the one she always used when she was about to explain away something inconvenient. "Oh, Mary," she said, "didn't Elliot tell you? We had to move the party to tomorrow. Some little emergency came up." But I could hear children laughing inside the sound of balloons being popped, and I could see through the window the setup still in full swing. When I called Elliot later that night, he seemed genuinely confused. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "No, Mom, the party's definitely today." Meadow must have mixed up the dates. I couldn't explain why, but that day I started to feel like something wasn't right. Maybe it was the fact that I knew the party had been happening all along, but for some reason I hadn't been invited to stay. Or perhaps it was the subtle, passive-aggressive tone in Meadow's voice. Either way, something in my gut told me I wasn't getting the full picture. Then there was Emma's first day of kindergarten. I had asked Meadow 3 times what time they were dropping Emma off so I could be there to take pictures. It was important to me. Those first moments mattered. But Meadow had said, "Oh, we're doing it super early, like 7 a.m. Probably too early for you." So I showed up anyway, earlier than she'd suggested, only to find out from Emma's teacher that Emma had been dropped off at the normal time, 8:30. I had missed seeing my granddaughter's first steps into her classroom. And when I called Elliot about it later, his response was the same as always. "Oh, Mom, I'm sure Meadow just forgot to mention it. You know how she is." Then came Christmas last year. I had already been feeling distant, but this was the first Christmas I spent entirely alone. Meadow had called me 2 days before, and in a voice dripping with false concern, had told me that Elliot was feeling overwhelmed with work stress, so they were keeping Christmas dinner small this year, just the immediate family. I had no idea that the immediate family didn't include me. I spent the day alone, reheating leftovers and watching old movies. I didn't expect anything extravagant, but I at least thought they would call me. It wasn't until later when Ruth mentioned that they had a huge celebration with friends and neighbors. I saw the photos on Instagram. There were about 20 people there, including Elliot's college friends and some neighbors. And of course, I wasn't in a single picture. Each memory clicked into place. The pieces that didn't seem to fit before now made sense. I had been systematically pushed out of their lives. But it wasn't just coincidence. No, this was carefully orchestrated. Meadow's plan was unfolding before my eyes piece by piece. By the time the sun came up, I was exhausted, but had reached one undeniable conclusion. Meadow had engineered all of it. Every missed event, every scheduling conflict, every miscommunication had been a deliberate effort to isolate me. As I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, sipping my coffee, I pulled out my phone. I decided to scroll through Meadow's social media posts over the last year. I wanted to see what I had missed, what they had all been doing without me. There they were, right in front of me. Meadow sitting in the front row of Tommy's school play, grinning like she belonged there. The play I had asked about multiple times, the play, Meadow had told me, had been canceled because of a flu outbreak. Another lie. Then there were the photos from Emma's dance recital. Meadow had told me it was just a practice session. Nothing special, but here was Meadow again, front and center, arms wrapped around her children. Her smile radiant as if everything was perfect. Every single photo painted a picture of a family that was thriving without me, without any acknowledgement of my absence. Each picture was tagged with captions about family memories, celebrating the joys of being together. And there I was, barely a ghost in the background. How had I missed it? How had I allowed it to go on for so long? The cruelest part was how effortless it all seemed. The photos, the captions, the warmth, all so carefully constructed. And I, the one who had been there, the one who raised Elliot and helped with the children, was erased from their lives. I had become a background figure in my own family story. That's when it hit me harder than ever before. Meadow wasn't just taking space in my family. She had taken everything. My place, my role, my importance. And now it seemed she had convinced Elliot that I was no longer necessary, no longer important. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden, the one I'd planted with Elliot when he was a boy. He used to help me pulling weeds carefully, making sure not to hurt the delicate plants. When had I lost him? When had he stopped seeing me as essential to his happiness? The answer came to me slowly, painfully. Meadow had entered our lives, and slowly but surely she had worked to turn Elliot against me. I didn't even notice it happening. At first, Sunday dinners, which used to be a staple, became less frequent. Then the phone calls, once a regular part of my life, became nothing more than obligation check-ins on holidays. Sorry, Mom, can't talk long. Meadow's got us scheduled pretty tight today. She didn't even have to say it outright. It was the silences between the words, the little suggestions that I was becoming too much of a burden. That's how it started. Subtle hints that my presence was no longer needed, that I was a problem, an inconvenience. And Elliot, my beautiful son, he never questioned it. He started looking at me the way Meadow did, with that mixture of affection and pity. It was as if I was something precious, but increasingly irrelevant. I had spent decades raising Elliot, helping him, loving him, and now it seemed I had become a forgotten relic from his past. That night, after I hung up with Elliot, I sat alone in my living room, the silence overwhelming. I thought about how things had changed so quickly, how a woman who barely knew Elliot when she entered our lives had somehow managed to take him from me, my son, the one I had raised. I thought about the family we used to be, the way we laughed together, the way we shared stories over dinners. All of that was gone now, replaced by a hollow shell of what once was. I had no idea what happened to the man I raised. The son who used to call me every Sunday just to chat about life. The man who would invite me over for dinner just because he missed me. He used to be mine. But now he was someone else entirely. Someone Meadow had molded to her liking. I wasn't even sure where I had gone wrong. Was it my fault that I didn't see it sooner? Had I been too trusting, too blind to the subtle manipulations that were slowly, piece by piece, tearing my family apart? My heart ached, not just for me, but for the grandchildren I had barely seen in the past year. Tommy and Emma, my babies who I had helped raise, who had once run to me for comfort, who had shared their little joys with me. Now when I saw them, there was a strange distance between us. Tommy barely smiled when I hugged him. Emma's gaze had become more guarded, like she was being trained not to be too close to me. And that was the cruelest part of it all. Meadow didn't just want Elliot. She wanted to erase me entirely. She didn't want me in her life or in my grandchildren's lives. She wanted control. The thought made my stomach churn. The next day, I decided I couldn't sit by and let this continue. Something had to change. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I needed answers. But how could I get them? How could I confront Meadow without making things worse? How could I even talk to Elliot, who had become so distant from me, so lost in her web of lies? I spent hours pacing around my house, my thoughts spinning. I was sick of feeling like I was losing a battle that hadn't even been fought. I needed to confront this head on, but I didn't know how. I couldn't just let it all fall apart without a fight. It was then that I received a message that made my blood run cold. It was from Ruth. She had been the one person who always stuck by me, the one person who could see through Meadow's charm and tell me when something was wrong, but even Ruth had been manipulated by her. The message was simple: we need to talk. I know what's been going on. I stood there frozen for a moment as the weight of Ruth's words hit me. She knew. She knew everything. My heart skipped a beat.
maybe, just maybe, there was someone else who could help me fix this. Maybe Ruth and I could work together to bring the truth to light. I called her immediately, desperate to hear what she knew. When she picked up, her voice was low, cautious.
"Mary," she started, "I've seen the signs. I've seen the photos. I know what Meadow's doing. I've just been too afraid to say anything. I thought maybe if I just stayed out of it, everything would go back to normal. But I can't stay silent anymore."
It was a relief to hear Ruth's voice, to know that I wasn't entirely alone in this. But hearing her confirm my suspicions made the reality of it all hit even harder. Meadow had been systematically isolating me, cutting me out of family events, and turning everyone against me. And now Ruth was telling me that she'd seen it too.
The betrayal cut deeper than anything I could have imagined.
Ruth and I agreed to meet the next day. I didn't know what we could do, but at least we would have each other. Together, maybe we could finally stop Meadow's games.
When I arrived at Ruth's house, I felt a strange sense of dread. I had no idea how this was going to play out, but it had to happen. The truth had to come out.
Ruth had already brewed a pot of tea, and we sat in her living room, the air thick with tension. Ruth's eyes were tired, but there was something else in them to resolve. She had seen the same things I had, and she was ready to do something about it.
"I've been thinking," she began,
"maybe it's time we stop letting her control the narrative. It's time we fight back, Mary. We can't let her erase us." I nodded, my hands trembling. "I've been thinking the same thing, but I don't know where to start. I don't know how to confront Elliot about all of this without losing him for good." Ruth took a deep breath, setting down her teacup. "You have to do it, Mary. You can't let her keep him under her thumb. He deserves to know the truth. And so do you."
The conversation felt like a turning point. Ruth and I spent hours talking, making plans. We both knew it wouldn't be easy.
But we also knew that if we didn't act now, everything I held dear would slip through my fingers for good. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent time reflecting on everything that had happened. I tried to prepare myself for the confrontation that was coming. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the stakes were higher than just me and Meadow. The stakes were about the future of my grandchildren, about protecting them from the damage she was doing to them too. I wasn't sure what would happen when I confronted Meadow or Elliot, but one thing was for sure: I was done being passive. I was done being erased. I wasn't going to let Meadow have everything. Not this time. The day finally came. I had made up my mind. I couldn't wait any longer. Ruth and I had agreed that it was time for me to confront Elliot, to demand answers, to stop letting Meadow control the narrative of our family. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, but I knew it was the only way. I had spent so many sleepless nights thinking about what to say, how to say it. But in the end, there was no easy way to get the truth out. The only way was to be honest, blunt, even, and hope Elliot would listen.
I didn't call him first. Instead, I sent a message. "Elliot, I need to see you. It's important. Please come by tonight. Just you. No frills. No explanations." He was going to have to face this head on, just like I was. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. I wasn't going to let him brush it off as a misunderstanding or a simple miscommunication. The response came swiftly. "I'll be there at 6. Just like that. He was coming. It was happening. I spent the next few hours trying to calm my nerves. I knew that I had to be strong, that I couldn't show weakness. But it wasn't easy. My hands were shaking as I set the table for dinner, even though I knew it would be a conversation, not a meal. I set out the good china, something I hadn't used in a while. I wanted this conversation to matter. I wanted it to feel important, like I was finally taking control of the situation. I didn't know how Elliot would react, but I had to be ready for whatever came. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I was already standing by the front door waiting. My heart was beating faster now, but I couldn't turn back. This was it. The doorbell rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I opened it to find Elliot standing there, looking like the same man I'd known for years, but also not. He seemed worn out, his face drawn and pale. His eyes were tired, and he didn't have the same warmth he once did. I almost didn't recognize him, and it broke my heart. "Hey, Mom," he said, offering a tight smile. He stepped inside, but there was an uncomfortable distance between us now. His body language was closed off, like he was bracing for something. "Elliot," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He nodded, looking uncertain, his eyes flicking around the room. I could tell he wasn't sure what to expect. He sat down at the dining table, and I followed suit, sitting across from him. I didn't waste time. I couldn't. "Elliot," I started, my voice steady but shaking inside. "Do you know why you're here?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm assuming this is about the cruise. I know it wasn't ideal to leave you on your birthday, but..." "No," I cut him off, leaning forward. "This isn't about the cruise. This is about you, about your family, about everything that's been happening." Elliot looked taken aback. "What do you mean?" "Do you know what's been going on, Elliot? Do you know how Meadow has been treating me? Do you realize that you've been pulled away from me from your own mother, and that you've been gaslighted into believing things that aren't true?" His eyes widened in shock, but I could see the walls go up, like he was preparing for some kind of defense. "I'm just telling you the truth, Elliot. I've been pushed out. I've been forgotten. My own grandchildren don't even recognize me anymore. And you, my son, you've been so manipulated by her that you've allowed this to happen." Elliot looked away, running his fingers through his hair. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been busy. Work has been overwhelming. I'm just trying to get everything together." "Enough with the excuses," I snapped, leaning forward. "You've been letting her do this for months, if not years. The missed events, the lies, the constant undermining of our relationship. You haven't even noticed what's been happening to your own family." His face reddened. "That's not fair. You're making this sound like it's all her fault. I'm doing the best I can, Mom." "No, Elliot, you're not. You've been ignoring it, pretending it's all okay, but it's not. And now look at where we are." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle between us. "Do you remember Tommy's birthday? The one where you promised I'd be there? I showed up, Elliot. I was waiting. But you weren't there." His expression faltered for just a moment, then hardened. "That was a mistake. I told you things got mixed up. We had to reschedule, you know how things get." I took a deep breath, holding up a folder. "I know more than you think. I've been doing some digging, Elliot. And what I found? It's not just about a birthday party. It's about everything." I opened the folder and slid it across the table. Inside were photos, documents, and the most damning piece of all, the paternity test results. "This is the truth, Elliot. This is why you need to open your eyes. Tommy isn't your son." Elliot's face drained of color. He stared at the papers, his hands trembling as he picked them up. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like hours, but it was only a few moments before he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Tommy is not your biological son. He's not your flesh and blood, and everything that Meadow has told you is a lie." I could see it in his face, the disbelief, the shock, the horror. His hands were shaking as he processed the information, and I could tell that the floor beneath him was falling out. For the first time in a long time, I could see him, truly see me. The words I had been holding in for so long came spilling out in a rush. "Do you understand now, Elliot? Do you understand how much you've been deceived? How much she's done to separate you from me and the rest of your family? She didn't just steal your heart, Elliot. She stole our family. And she's been playing you all along." His face twisted in pain as the realization set in, But I wasn't done. There was more. She's done this before, Elliot. She's manipulated men, destroyed families, all to get what she wants. And you're just another victim. I saw the tears welling in his eyes as he looked up at me. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I was so caught up. I know, darling, I said softly, my voice breaking. But you don't have to be caught up anymore. We can fix this. You can fix this. But it has to start now. Elliot sat there, his hands trembling, his mind racing. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis, and the comfortable life he thought he had known had just shattered into pieces. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the pain that I had been carrying for so long now reflected on his face. For a moment I thought he might speak, try to deny it, but instead he remained silent, holding the paternity test results in his hands like they were a lifeline. I knew this was a lot for him to process, but it was nothing compared to the years I had spent watching his family crumble under Meadow's manipulations. I weighted my hands, still trembling from the emotions that had surged through me, giving him space to come to terms with the truth. The silence stretched, and finally, Elliot spoke in a voice that was barely audible. This is a mistake, Mom. It can't be true. His voice cracked, the pain of disbelief clear in every syllable. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather the right words, the right way to break this to him. Elliot, this isn't a mistake. This is the truth. You've been living a lie for so long that it's become part of your reality. But it's not real. You need to see it, to hear it from me, because you can't keep running away from it. He shook his head almost desperately, as if trying to shake off the weight of what I was saying. But I raised Tommy. I've been his father for all these years. I don't understand how this is possible. I nodded slowly, my heart breaking for him. I know you've been a father to him, Elliot, in every way that matters, but the truth is you've been deceived. She knew exactly what she was doing when she lied to you. And she's done this to other men before. His eyes filled with tears, and it was clear that he was fighting back a flood of emotions. I can't believe this. How did I not see it? How did I let this happen? Because you were too trusting, I said, softly. Meadow knew how to manipulate you. She isolated you from your family, from the people who loved you. And slowly she made you question your reality. She used you, Elliot. She used your love for your children to keep you under her control. He wiped his eyes, a deep sadness overtaking him. And Tommy, he's not mine. No, darling, I said gently. Tommy's not your biological son. But that doesn't change the fact that you've been his father in every way that counts. You raised him, loved him, and he's been a part of your life. But you deserve the truth just as Tommy deserves to know who his real father is. Elliot was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him, the reality of it all sinking in. I watched as he processed everything, the betrayal, the confusion, the heartbreak. I could feel the air between us, thick with unspoken words. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes haunted. I don't know what to do now, Mom. I feel like everything has just fallen apart. You have to take it one step at a time, I said softly. First, you need to confront Meadow. You can't let her control this any longer. You deserve the truth, and so does Tommy. It's going to be hard, but it's the only way. Elliot nodded, his face pale. I know, I don't know how to even start. I feel so lost. You're not alone in this, Elliot, I said, reaching across the table and placing my hand on his. I'm here, and I'll help you through this. But you need to start by talking to her. You need to ask the hard questions, the ones you've been avoiding for so long. It's time to put an end to this deception. Elliot nodded again, his eyes still filled with pain. I'll talk to her. But I don't even know where to begin. How do I ask her if she's been lying to me about my own son?
You start with the truth, I said firmly. You don't need to have all the answers right now, but you need to ask the questions. And you need to be ready for whatever answers she gives you. We sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of everything pressing down on us. It wasn't just the paternity test or the lies that Meadow had woven over the years. It was the years of love and trust that had been torn apart by deceit. The family that we once knew had been shattered, and now all we could do was try to piece it back together. Eventually, Elliot stood up, his shoulders heavy with the burden of everything he had just learned. "I'll talk to her tonight," he said, his voice quieter than before. "I don't know what will happen, but I need to know the truth. For Tommy, for me, for all of us." "I'm proud of you, Elliot," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, but you're strong enough to face it. And I'll be here every step of the way." He nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude before he turned to leave. "Thanks, Mom. I don't know what I would have done without you." As he walked out the door, I sat back in my chair, my heart heavy with all the weight of the truth that had finally come to light. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was a necessary one, and I was ready for whatever came next. The following morning, I woke up with a sense of heaviness that felt like it was permanently lodged in my chest. The events of the past few days had left a lasting imprint on me, and I knew that the confrontation between Elliot and Meadow was inevitable. There was no way around it. They had to face the truth, no matter how difficult or painful it was going to be. I spent most of the day preparing myself for whatever would unfold. I had no idea what the future would hold, but I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. My mind kept going back to Tommy. He was still so young, still so innocent, and I couldn't help but worry about how this revelation would affect him. Would he understand? Would he feel betrayed, confused? I had no answers, only the crushing weight of uncertainty. Elliot had said he would speak to Meadow last night, but I hadn't heard anything from him. I knew that talking to her wouldn't be easy. She wasn't the type of person to admit fault or wrongdoing. It was likely that she would deny everything, try to twist the truth in her favor, and manipulate the situation as she had done for so long. I checked my phone, hoping for some sign of what was going on, but there was nothing. No texts, no missed calls, just the cold silence of a family fractured by lies. Around midday, my sister Ruth called. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what I could say to her. She had been one of the few people I had confided in over the years, but even she had been manipulated by Meadow. She too had been kept in the dark about everything that was going on. I wondered if she would be just as shocked by the truth as Elliot had been. "Hey, Loretta," Ruth said, her voice warm but laced with concern. "How are you doing?" I sighed, running my hand through my hair. "I'm okay. Or at least I'm trying to be." "I know this whole thing has been a lot for you," she said gently. "I heard from Carl that Elliot was supposed to have a talk with Meadow last night. How did it go? Do you have any idea?" I closed my eyes, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I don't know, Ruth. I haven't heard from him since he left yesterday. I'm sure he's having a hard time with it." "I can only imagine," Ruth said sympathetically. "But you know what? He'll get through this. He's strong just like you." I smiled weakly, grateful for her support. But the truth was, I wasn't so sure. Elliot had always been the most trusting person I knew, and the idea that Meadow had manipulated him so completely for all these years left me wondering if he would ever truly recover from this. "I hope you're right," I said quietly. "But there's more to it than just Elliot. I'm really worried about Tommy. He's so young, and this is going to change everything for him. I just don't know how to explain it all." Ruth was silent for a moment,
and I could almost hear her thinking, "You'll figure it out, Loretta. You always do. And remember, we're all here for you, no matter what happens." I thanked her, and we ended the call. Her words were comforting, but they didn't ease the dread that had settled in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift in a way that none of us could prepare for. Later that evening, Elliot finally called me back. I could hear the tension in his voice before he even spoke. "Mom, I talked to Meadow." My heart started racing. I could tell by his tone that things hadn't gone well. "What happened, Elliot? What did she say?" There was a long pause on the other end, and I could feel the weight of his words before he even spoke them. "She denied everything. She said it was all lies. She swore that Tommy was my son and that the test results were wrong. She said I was just being manipulated by you." I closed my eyes, the sting of her words cutting through me. "Of course she did," I muttered. "That's exactly what I expected. She's not going to admit it, Elliot. She'll twist everything to make herself the victim." I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But part of me wants to believe her. I've been Tommy's father for so long. How can I just throw that all away? I could hear the confusion in his voice, the inner battle that was tearing him apart. "Elliot, I understand how you feel. I do. But you can't let her keep you in this fog. You deserve the truth. You need to see past her lies for your sake and for Tommy's." "I don't know what to do, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I love Tommy. I've raised him. I don't want to lose him." "You won't lose him," I said firmly. "But you have to understand, Elliot Tommy deserves to know the truth too. He deserves to know who his real father is. And you deserve to know what's been going on behind your back." Elliot was silent for a long moment. I could hear him breathing, the weight of the situation settling over him. "I don't know if I can face this, Mom. It's too much." I felt my heart ache for him. "I know it's hard, sweetheart. But you're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to do it all by yourself." "I'll try, Mom," he said finally. "I'll try to face the truth. For Tommy." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "That's all I can ask for, Elliot. I'm proud of you." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. I knew that Elliot had a long road ahead of him, but I also knew that it was a road he had to walk. It wasn't going to be easy, but sometimes the truth was the only way to move forward. As the night stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was only just beginning. Meadow wouldn't give up her hold over Elliot so easily, and I wasn't sure how far she was willing to go to protect her secrets. But one thing was certain: things were about to get even more complicated. The days that followed felt like a blur. Elliot had promised to continue searching for the truth, but every step seemed like a struggle for him. I couldn't help but wonder if Meadow had been weaving her lies so tightly around him for so long that he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I knew he loved Tommy with all his heart, and I understood the emotional tug-of-war he was experiencing. But the longer this dragged on, the more I saw him slipping away from the man I had known. Every time I spoke to him, there was an underlying distance, a hesitation in his voice that made it clear he was no longer the same person. He was caught in the middle of a battle that he never asked for. I had hoped that eventually he would reach out to David Tommy's biological father after the confrontation with Meadow. I wasn't naive enough to think that would happen quickly, but I couldn't shake the nagging worry that David too was starting to slip out of the picture. He had been patient, kind, and supportive, but I saw his own frustrations growing. He was doing everything in his power to ensure that Tommy knew who he truly was, but it was like trying to pull a thread from a tangled knot. David had started to distance himself a little, maybe out of respect for Elliot, or perhaps because he was beginning to feel like there was no point. Every time he tried to have a conversation with Elliot, the walls went up. Elliot didn't want to hear it. I knew it was going to take time,
But seeing David's quiet disappointment made my own heart ache. He wasn't just a man trying to reconnect with his son. He was a man who had been denied his place in Tommy's life for 7 years, and now, when the truth was finally out, it was like he was being pushed back once again. It wasn't right.
And the kids. The children were my other concern. It had been nearly a week since we had the conversation with Meadow, and Tommy and Emma had barely been spoken to about the truth. I knew Elliot wasn't ready, but I also knew that the longer they lived in ignorance, the more complicated things would get. I had heard Meadow's subtle manipulation of them in the background, the way she distracted Tommy when he asked about me, the way she made Emma uncomfortable when she wanted to talk about Grandma.
I didn't know what was worse, the way Meadow was subtly erasing me from their lives, or the fact that Elliot hadn't even noticed it yet. He was still caught in the web of her lies, still trying to fix something that wasn't even broken to begin with. The fact that he couldn't see through her manipulation broke my heart. I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I had to do something. I needed to reach out to the children, particularly Tommy, and start the conversation that Elliot wasn't ready to have. But I wasn't sure how to begin. I needed to be careful. I didn't want to betray Elliot's trust, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer.
The next morning, I invited Tommy over. I didn't make a big deal about it, no grand announcements, no agenda. Just a simple invitation to spend the afternoon with Grandma. I didn't want him to feel like something was wrong. I just wanted to give him a safe space where he could talk without the pressure of Meadow looming in the background. When Tommy arrived, he was his usual energetic self, full of excitement and curiosity. But there was something different in his eyes. He seemed older somehow, like the weight of things he didn't understand was starting to press on him. It wasn't a look I was used to seeing on his face.
"Hi, Grandma," he said, his arms wrapping around me in a hug that made me smile despite everything else.
"Hi, sweetie. How was school?" I asked, guiding him into the living room.
"Okay." He shrugged, his voice a little quieter than usual. "Missed you, though. I didn't see you much last week." That stung more than I cared to admit. I had been so consumed with everything that had been happening that I hadn't been able to spend the time I wanted with him. "I missed you too, Tommy. I'm sorry I wasn't around, but I'm here now." We spent the next few hours talking, and I did my best to keep the atmosphere light. I didn't want him to feel like he had to carry the weight of adult problems. But as the afternoon wore on, I could sense that there was something he wasn't saying. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to ask something, but wasn't sure if he should. Finally, after we finished eating lunch, he looked at me with those big, trusting eyes and asked a question I wasn't prepared for.
"Grandma, why didn't you come on the trip with us?"
It took me by surprise. My heart dropped into my stomach. He had been told that the trip was a family vacation, and yet there had been no mention of me. No explanation, no apology, just a lie. I had other things to do, sweetie," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I'm so glad you had a good time. What was your favorite part?" Tommy thought for a moment, then smiled. "I liked swimming in the pool, and I learned to swim like a dolphin." He laughed at the memory, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He wanted to say more, but he wasn't sure how. "I'm proud of you, Tommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're growing up so fast." We spent a little more time together, but I could feel the tension building between us. Like there were more questions hanging in the air. I didn't want to push him, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know what he was really thinking. "Tommy, can I ask you something?" I said gently. He looked at me, his expression serious for his age. "Sure, Grandma." "Do you ever wonder why things seem different with Mommy and Daddy?" I asked, keeping my tone soft but direct. Tommy hesitated, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Sometimes, he admitted, "Mommy says we have to keep some things a secret, and she doesn't like when I talk to you too much." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real.
Meadow wasn't just isolating me from Elliot. She was isolating me from my own grandchildren. I see, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Well, sweetie, I want you to know that you don't have to keep anything from me. You can always talk to me. You're part of my family and I love you no matter what.
Tommy smiled weakly, but I could tell he didn't fully understand. I wasn't sure if he ever would. After a while, I sent him home, my heart heavy with all the unspoken things between us. I wasn't sure where the future was headed, but I knew that things were only going to get harder before they got better. And as I closed the door behind him, I realized just how deep Meadow's web had become. How far-reaching her control had been even over the smallest details of our family's life. But I also knew that the time for letting her manipulate everyone was over. It was time to take back control to make sure that Tommy and Emma knew the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The days that followed were quiet, almost unnervingly so. I was waiting, watching, and hoping that Elliot would come to his senses. But I had also grown realistic about the situation. I couldn't sit idly by anymore, waiting for someone else to fix things. I had to do something, and the idea of waiting for the right moment was just another excuse for inaction. The truth had to be brought into the open, and I wasn't going to stand by while my family continued to be manipulated. I knew the children were caught in the middle. Tommy and Emma had become pawns in a game they didn't understand, and the longer they were kept in the dark, the harder it would be to untangle the mess Meadow had created. And Meadow Margaret had to be stopped. Her hold on Elliot had only deepened over the years, and while he still held some faint glimmer of trust in her, it was slipping. I could feel it, but there was still too much hesitation, too much fear of confronting the woman who had buried her claws so deeply into his life. I needed a plan.
David had been more than patient with me, but I knew he was growing frustrated as well. He had a right to be. He had waited for years, hoping for a sign from Elliot that he would finally wake up to the truth, but that hadn't happened yet. But David wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't like Meadow running away when things got difficult. He had stayed the course, and I could see in his eyes that he was committed to being a part of Tommy's life, no matter how hard it got. But as much as David was fighting for Tommy's right to know the truth, he was fighting against the very thing that had manipulated and controlled Elliot for years, Meadow's ability to distort reality. The longer I watched Elliot's reluctance to confront her, the more I realized that this wasn't just about Tommy. It was about Elliot finding his own voice, his own strength. He needed to believe in himself again. So I decided to take the first step. One afternoon, when I knew Elliot would be home, I called him. I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of days, and I could sense that he was still avoiding the issue. But that was no longer an option. I wasn't going to let him avoid the truth any longer. "Hey, Mom," Elliot said, his voice a little guarded. "How are you doing?"
"I'm fine, sweetheart. But we need to talk." I said, my tone more serious than usual.
There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "About what?" he finally asked. "About everything," I replied. "About Tommy, about Margaret, about all of it." I could almost hear him bristle on the other end. "Mom, can't this wait? I've been busy. Work's been a lot lately and the kids." "No, Elliot, it can't wait," I interrupted. "This has been going on long enough. I know you've been avoiding it, but it's time to face it." There was another long pause, and then, "Okay, I'll come over. I don't know what you want to say, but I can't keep avoiding this either." It was a small victory, but at least it was a step in the right direction. He was coming to me. That meant something. I spent the next few hours preparing myself for what was to come. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a conversation that we could just walk away from. This was the kind of conversation that would either make or break everything. When Elliot arrived, he looked tired. His eyes were heavy with the weight of everything he had been carrying. I could see it in the way he stood there in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot like he wasn't sure what was about to happen. "Mom," he said, giving me a tight hug. "Let's get this over with." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I led him into the living room where we could talk privately. The quiet hum of the house was almost deafening as we sat down. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice soft but firm. "I know this isn't easy, but I can't keep quiet anymore. You're not seeing everything that's been happening. I know you think Margaret Meadow is just trying to help, but she's not. She's been manipulating everything. You've been blind to it, but she's been isolating you from the truth for years." Elliot's expression darkened. "Mom, we've been through this. I know you don't like her, but this isn't about liking her or not." I cut him off. "This is about you being so wrapped up in her lies that you're blind to the truth. And the truth is this: Tommy is not your son. He's David's son, and I have the proof." I reached for the manila envelope that I had prepared earlier. The one with the DNA test results, the investigators' reports, everything that had taken so long to gather. Elliot stared at the envelope, but he didn't reach for it. "Mom, this is insane," he said, his voice trembling. "I've raised Tommy for 7 years. I've been there for him every day. He's my son." "I know you love him, Elliot," I said, my voice softening. "But you need to understand the truth. Love doesn't change the facts. The facts are right there in that envelope." I handed him the envelope, my hands shaking slightly. He hesitated, looking at me like I was about to ask him to do something unthinkable. But then, with a deep sigh, he opened it. The silence that followed was suffocating. I watched as he read the results, his face draining of color, as the reality of what I was saying began to sink in. The words, 99.7% probability of paternity, seemed to echo in the room as he processed the information. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be true. Tommy is mine. He's my son." "Look at the evidence, Elliot," I urged, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I know this is hard, but you need to see it. You can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." Elliot put the papers down, his hands trembling. His eyes were wide, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of doubt in them. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said quietly. "I don't know what's real." "It's all real, sweetheart," I replied, "and you deserve to know the truth." Elliot buried his face in his hands, his voice breaking as he muttered, "How could I not see it? How could I have been so blind?" I didn't know how to answer him. How could I? The truth was, no one saw it until it was too late. The moment of silence that stretched between us felt like it could last forever. There were so many emotions I could sense swirling within Elliot: shock, anger, betrayal, and a deep, gut-wrenching confusion. But there was one emotion I didn't see clarity. He wasn't ready to accept it yet, not fully. I knew it would take time. I had waited for so long to get to this point, and I wasn't about to let him turn away from the truth just because it was hard to swallow. "Mom," he finally said, lifting his head, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "I've spent my whole life believing in this family, and now it feels like everything is falling apart." I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "Elliot, you have to understand that nothing is falling apart. The foundation of our family has always been love, and love doesn't change. What you've built with Tommy is real. That doesn't go away just because of this." He pulled his hand away from mine, running it through his hair in frustration. "But what am I supposed to do with this? With David? With the fact that my entire life has been a lie?" His voice cracked on the last word, and I felt my heart ache for him. "You confront it, Elliot," I said firmly. "You don't let it define who you are or who you have been. You look at what's in front of you and deal with it one step at a time." It was hard to see him this way, so broken, so lost. I had raised him to be strong, to face challenges with determination, but now he was questioning everything he knew. His world was crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it except be there for him. "You don't have to go through this alone," I added softly. "We'll face it together, okay? We take it one step at a time. First, we deal with Tommy and David, then we move forward from there." Elliot nodded slowly, still in disbelief. I don't know how to start. "I think the first thing is to talk to David. He deserves to know where he stands, and you deserve to hear what he has to say." Elliot looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You're right. I owe him that." I couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Elliot was starting to make the decision on his own, no longer allowing Meadow to control the narrative. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning, Elliot did something that shocked me. He reached out to David. I had no idea what their conversation was like, but it didn't matter. The important thing was that he took the first step, and that meant everything. The road ahead was still unclear, but now at least there was a chance for honesty. A chance for a future where Elliot could reclaim his life from the clutches of someone who had manipulated him for so long. I spent the day reflecting on the journey that had led us to this point. A few years ago, I never would have imagined that my family would be in such disarray. I thought that the hardest thing I would face was the death of my husband, the man who had always been my partner in everything. But this felt like a betrayal so deep, so intimate, that I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I realized that the pain I had been carrying wasn't just about Meadow. It wasn't just about the lies she had told. It was about the fact that my family, the very foundation of my life, had been eroded by someone I had allowed to take a place in it. The quiet, insidious way that someone can worm their way into your life, turning everyone against you, had left me isolated and vulnerable. I had underestimated the power of manipulation, the depth to which someone could rewrite a narrative in their favor, making even the most loving relationships feel tenuous. And yet through it all, I had always had one constant: my children. Even if I hadn't fully realized it, even if I had doubted my place in their lives, I had always been there for them. And in the end, that was what mattered. I had raised them with love, with values, with the belief that family was everything. It was no coincidence that David had come into our lives. He had been a catalyst for change, a force of truth in a family that had been buried under lies for far too long.
But the hardest truth of all was this: we all had to face our own parts in this mess. I had allowed myself to be pushed aside for too long, to be treated like a ghost in my own family. I had allowed it because I thought it was easier to stay quiet, to keep the peace. But staying silent had been my mistake.
"I'm sorry, Mom," Elliot said, his voice quiet over the phone later that evening. "I should have listened to you sooner. I see it now. I see how much she's taken from me, from all of us." "I know, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But the important thing is that you're seeing it now, and you're doing something about it. That's all that matters." Elliot didn't speak right away. I could tell he was struggling, but at least he was trying, and that was the first step. "We'll figure this out," I said gently, "together." For the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope. The next days were spent slowly unraveling the lies, piece by piece. David came over often, and he and Elliot began to build a new understanding, one based on truth, not deception. The children too were part of the process, slowly, cautiously, but with love in their hearts. We were a family, and despite everything that had happened, we weren't broken. The path ahead wasn't easy. There would be difficult conversations, painful realizations, and a lot of healing to do. But I knew that now at least we were all moving in the right direction. David was part of our family now, and though it had been a long and painful journey, the future felt brighter. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful that we could rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be perfect,
Nothing ever is, but it would be real. And that was enough. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance between hope and uncertainty. For the first time, we began to breathe life into the relationships that had been suffocated by secrets and lies. The wounds of the past didn't heal overnight, but at least the air was clear, the burden of deceit lifted. We didn't rush the process. There was no blueprint for rebuilding a family after it had been torn apart, but together we were figuring it out. David was still tentative around Tommy, unsure of his place. It wasn't easy for him. The little boy had never known him as anything other than a stranger, yet there was a bond forming. Slowly but surely, Tommy's openness began to extend to David. It wasn't immediate, but the small moments, like when Tommy sat on his lap or asked him to help with his homework, were the signs of change. It was awkward at times, but it was progress. Meanwhile, Elliot and I spent hours talking about everything. Not just about Meadow, but about the years we had lost, about the moments I had missed, about the years I had spent watching him drift away from me. We worked through the tension between us, carefully untangling the misunderstandings and assumptions that had built up. I knew he was still hurting, still struggling with the enormity of what had happened, but I could also see that he was slowly starting to heal. We started spending more time together, just the two of us, like we used to. Dinners on Sundays, conversations over coffee. It was the little things that made a difference, the things that had been missing for so long. But even as we healed, there were reminders of the damage Meadow had caused. There were moments when I would see Tommy's face light up at the mention of his dad and David, and it would hit me. I wasn't Tommy's grandmother in the way I used to be. I had to redefine that role for myself and for him. The boundaries were shifting. Then one afternoon, I received a phone call from a lawyer. I had been expecting it, but the moment the words came, I still wasn't prepared for the weight of them. Meadow had been served. She was refusing to relinquish her rights voluntarily. The fight wasn't over. It was a cold realization, one that made my stomach twist. We were going to have to fight for the children, for Tommy, for Emma. I had never thought I would be in a courtroom fighting to keep my family intact. I had always believed in the simplicity of family ties, the unbreakable bonds between parents and children. But this was not a simple family dispute. This was a battle for the truth, for our future. "We can't let her win," I told Elliot as we sat in the living room later that night. "We can't let her continue to destroy everything she touches." Elliot didn't argue. He was determined now. He had seen through the lies, felt the impact of them, and he wasn't going to back down. He was a different person from the man who had walked into my house months ago. He was stronger now, more aware of the lies that had been fed to him for so long. "I'm not letting her take them, Mom," he said, his voice steady. "We're going to fight this, and we're going to win." The next few days felt like a whirlwind. We met with lawyers, discussed custody arrangements, and tried to put together a plan that would protect the children. The legal system wasn't easy to navigate, especially when emotions were so raw, but I knew we had the truth on our side. And for once, that felt like the strongest weapon we could have. Meanwhile, David was becoming more integrated into the family. He was spending more time with Tommy, talking with Elliot about the future, and helping us navigate the complexities of the situation. It wasn't easy for him, but he did it because he knew it was the right thing to do. He also had a quiet conversation with me one evening after dinner. We sat on the porch watching the sunset, and he spoke softly. "You know," David began, "I never wanted things to be this complicated. I didn't want to disrupt your family. But after seeing how everything unfolded, I realized now that I couldn't just walk away. Tommy deserves to know the truth, and so do you." I nodded. "I know. And I'm glad you didn't walk away. You've become part of this family in a way that I didn't expect, but in a way that we all need."
There was a comfort in that, in knowing that despite everything, we had come together. Despite all of the pain and the heartbreak, we were beginning to rebuild slowly, carefully, but surely. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, the air heavy with tension. Meadow was there, sitting across from us, her eyes cold and calculating. She was a different woman from the one I had once considered family. Now all I could see was the face of someone determined to hold on to control at any cost. The lawyer spoke on our behalf, laying out the evidence, presenting the facts, and calling out the lies. I could see the strain on Meadow's face as the truth was revealed piece by piece. The facade was cracking, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She had lied, manipulated, and deceived, but the truth had a way of finding its way to the surface. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. Meadow's parental rights were terminated. It was a bittersweet victory, one that didn't bring back the lost years, but offered the children a chance at a future free from manipulation. As we left the courthouse, Elliot turned to me with a soft smile. "We did it, Mom," he said. "We're free." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. We were free. Free to rebuild, free to love without fear, free to be the family we had always been meant to be. That evening, we sat around the dinner table, just the four of us, Elliot, Tommy, Emma, and me. The air was lighter, the tension gone. We laughed, we shared stories, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it was filled with possibilities. We had won, not just in court, but in life. The battle was over, and we had come out stronger on the other side. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect, and it would take time to heal completely. But one thing was certain. We were a family. And no matter what, nothing could ever change that.